Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a really important balancing act for sales leaders, especially in inside sales.
Yeah, it's a big one.
We've got some research that really digs into this tension between managers needing control, needing to track performance.
Right, using those metrics and processes.
And then also trying to build a work environment that's, well, positive and motivating for the team.
Exactly. And our mission today is basically to unpack that based on the research and figure out what really drives success and, happiness for inside sales folks.
It sounds like a classic management challenge, really. You need the results, you need processes followed.
For sure, that often leads to these controlling mechanisms. But like you said, happy, motivated teams, they generally just do better work.
So how do these two things clash, especially you mentioned in inside sales?
Well, that's what we're going to explore. It seems particularly tricky in that specific environment.
Okay, before we dive deeper, let's maybe define some key terms from the research, just so we're all on the same page. First up, outcome controls.
Yeah. So traditionally, thinking about outside sales reps, this is pretty straightforward. It's sales revenue, hitting your quota, number of units sold, that sort of thing.
Okay.
But this research broadens that a bit, specifically for the inside sales context.
All right, so let's define inside sales then, because that context seems key.
Definitely. We're talking about sales professionals who typically work remotely, often in office setups that might feel, a bit like call centers sometimes.
Yeah.
They're using phones, VoIP, video calls, email, all the digital channels to connect. But the really crucial difference, say, compared to a standard call center agent, is their primary goal, generating revenue, making sales.
Got it. So that leads to another term you mentioned, specific to inside sales, phone operational controls. What falls under that?
Okay, so these are controls focused purely on the phone-related activities, things like setting limits on call times, tracking average handle time, making sure agents stick to their schedules, call volume targets.
Oh, okay. So it's not just the sales result, but how they're working on the phone minute by minute almost.
Precisely. These are layered on top of the usual sales outcome goals.
Right. Wow. Okay, and the research also talks about motivation, different kinds.
Yes, two main types are relevant here. First, there's autonomous motivation.
Okay.
That's the internal drive, doing something because you find it interesting or valuable or you just enjoy it. It feels like your choice.
Yeah.
It's often linked to feeling, competent, connected, and having some freedom autonomy.
That sounds like the ideal state, maybe? And the other type?
The other is controlled motivation. This is more about doing something to get an external reward, like a bonus, or maybe more importantly, to avoid a punishment or negative consequence.
Ah, so it feels more like pressure, an obligation.
Exactly. You feel like you have to do it, rather than wanting to do it from within.
Okay, got the terms. So let's dig into this balancing act now. You said inside sales managers are in a pretty unique spot.
They really are. What's fascinating is they're juggling these two sets of outcomes. They've got the sales results, revenue, targets, the usual stuff. But also these phone operational outcomes called metrics, schedule adherence, all that activity tracking we just talked about. This dual focus just isn't typical in traditional outside sales management.
And that creates the challenge.
Right. It makes managing inside sales fundamentally different.
And the research points to a potential downside here, even if managers mean well.
Yeah, this is really crucial. The study suggests that even when managers are genuinely trying to create, an employee-focused, autonomous kind of culture, if there's a strong focus on those phone operational outcomes, it can actually backfire. It can negatively impact both the agent's sales performance and how satisfied they are with their job.
Wow. So you could be trying to build people up, but the system itself undermines it.
Pretty much. It's like trying to encourage someone to run freely, but you've tied weights to their ankles with these strict phone metrics. The good intentions get negated.
So let's break that down. What's the core problem with leaning too heavily on these operational controls?
Well, a big one is it chips away at the agent's sense of autonomy, their feeling of control over their own work.
How so?
If you're constantly being monitored on call lengths or how many calls you make per hour, it reduces your flexibility, your ability to make judgment calls. It just creates this daily pressure and stress.
I guess that links back to the motivation types we discussed.
Absolutely. When agents feel like they're under a microscope, with rewards and punishments tied directly to hitting these specific phone numbers, it pushes them towards that controlled motivation. They're doing it because they feel they have to avoid trouble or maybe get a small reward, not because they're intrinsically driven.
Which then presumably squeezes out the autonomous kind.
Exactly. The pressure from needing to adhere strictly to phone operational targets can actively suppress those positive feelings of autonomy, competence, and relatedness. It works directly against building that internal drive.
And the impact on job satisfaction seems pretty clear then.
Yeah, feeling constantly monitored, controlled, like you can't make your own decisions. It leads to lower well-being, higher stress, and ultimately people just aren't as happy in their jobs. It feels like micromanagement.
Okay, but let's flip it. The research also emphasizes the power of that autonomous motivation, right? When agents do feel that sense of free choice.
Oh, definitely. The findings are quite clear. When inside sales agents experience that internal drive, that sense of choice, it has a really positive impact on their sales performance.
Why is that, do you think?
Well, sales roles, especially complex ones, often need higher level thinking, problem solving, adapting to the customer, building rapport. These things really flourish when someone feels self-driven, not just like they're checking boxes.
Right. But then there's this twist. The study talks about a moderating effect from the phone controls. Can you explain that? Sounds a bit technical.
Yeah, let's try to simplify it. Think of autonomous motivation, like turning up a light switch. It brightens performance and satisfaction. Now, think of a heavy emphasis on phone operational controls as a dimmer switch working against it. Even if you flip the autonomous motivation switch on, if the phone control's dimmer is turned way down low, meaning high control.
It reduces the brightness.
Exactly. It weakens the positive effect of that internal drive. So even if you have a motivated agent, focusing too hard on rigid phone rules can diminish how much that motivation actually translates into better performance or job satisfaction. The benefits get dampened.
That really highlights the balancing act and circles back to the difference between managing inside and outside sales. You mentioned it's fundamentally different.
It really is.
Yeah.
The sheer level of oversight in inside sales, tracking both sales results and these daily phone activities, often very transparently, maybe on dashboards everyone sees.
Yeah.
That's just not how outside sales is typically managed. For outside reps, phone usage isn't usually a core outcome metric in the same way. That constant granular tracking changes the whole dynamic.
So what were some of the specific findings from the research that illustrate all this?
Okay, so first, they found that focusing on sales outcome controls the targets. The revenue goals actually had a positive influence on an agent's autonomous motivation.
Oh, interesting. So setting sales goals can actually boost that internal drive.
It seems so, yeah. When done right, having clear sales goals can give people a sense of purpose and achievement, which fuels that internal motivation.
But what about the direct link between those sales goals and actual job performance?
Here's where it gets surprising, at least in this inside sales context. They didn't find a direct correlation between sales outcome controls alone and job performance.
Really? Why not?
Well, it strongly suggests that in this environment, those operational outcomes, the phone metrics, are a really significant part of how overall performance is actually judged or evaluated. It's not just about hitting the final sales number.
Okay, so how does motivation fit back into that picture then?
The research showed that autonomous motivation fully mediated the relationship between sales outcome control and job performance.
Whoa, okay. Fully mediated. What does that mean for us?
It means the positive impact of setting sales goals on performance happens because those goals boost the agent's internal drive, their autonomous motivation. The motivation is the crucial link. Without boosting that motivation, the sales goals alone didn't directly connect to performance in this study.
I see. So the goals work through the motivation. What about job satisfaction? How did sales goals affect that?
Interestingly, sales outcome controls had a direct negative effect on job satisfaction.
Negative. Why?
Probably due to the pressure. Constantly chasing targets can be stressful, right?
Makes sense.
However, autonomous motivation helped buffer this. It partially mediated the negative effect. So while targets might add stress, if agents also feel intrinsically motivated and have some autonomy, it lessens the negative hit on their job satisfaction.
Okay, so motivation is key for performance and helps protect satisfaction from target pressure. Now back to those phone controls. What did they do to this whole picture?
This is the critical part. Phone operational outcome controls that heavy focus on call times, adherence, etc. They negatively moderated the positive impact of autonomous motivation.
Meaning they weakened the good effects again.
Exactly. They weakened the positive link between autonomous motivation and both job performance and job satisfaction. So those strict phone rules act like kryptonite to the benefits of having a motivated, empowered team.
Wow. Did the research have any, like, real-world data to back this up?
Yes, they did a secondary study with a big Fortune 100 financial services firm, and they found direct links between specific phone operational controls, things like number of inbound calls handled, average handle time, logged in time, and actual sales performance.
So that confirms these metrics are being used to judge performance.
It certainly reinforces that idea, yes. And they also talked to inside sales leaders across different industries.
Oh, yeah. What did they say?
They basically confirmed it. They said, yeah, we use a blend of sales outcomes and phone operational outcomes to evaluate our inside sales agents. The exact mix, the percentages might vary by industry, but the blend is common.
Okay, this paints a really clear, if complex, picture. We've dug into the research, this tension. Let's get practical. What are, say, the top 3 takeaways for sales leaders listening to this? Things they can actually do.
All right, number 1, based on all this, is to really focus on fostering autonomous motivation. Actively build a culture that prioritizes autonomy, competence, and relatedness.
Okay, how? Any examples?
Well, the research mentioned Nationwide Insurance's Agent Experience Program. Sounds like it focuses on relationships, training, empowering agents, or ABF Freight apparently gives its inside agents significant autonomy over their time, almost like inside-based outside agents.
Treating them more like professionals, managing their own day, that could be a shift. What's takeaway number 2?
Number 2, shift your coaching focus. Move away from just hammering the results, the targets, and coach more on the how.
How they work.
Yeah. Provide regular feedback that emphasizes their activities, their decision-making, their skills development. Focus on their capabilities and growth, not just the numbers. Things like synchronous coaching, listening in live, and offering advice can show you're invested in helping them improve, not just judging them.
So more developmental feedback, less purely evaluative. Like instead of hit your numbers, it's let's talk about how you handled that tricky call.
Exactly. I noticed you did X. What if we tried Y next time? That kind of thing.
Got it. And the third key takeaway?
The third one is about finding creative ways to balance the need for sales results with those operational requirements. Don't just rigidly enforce the phone metrics.
Be more flexible.
Yeah, explore flexibility. For instance, maybe agents who hit their sales goals early get some choice.
Yeah.
They could choose to stay on calls, or maybe use that time for extra training or peer coaching.
Interesting.
Or perhaps give high performers more say over their schedules. And importantly, involve the team. Ask them for ideas on how to meet operational needs without crushing morale. Get their buy-in.
That makes a lot of sense, involving them in the solution.
When people feel part of the process, they're much more likely to support it.
Okay, so just to wrap this up, we've really explored this delicate balance for inside sales managers needing control versus fostering motivation.
Yeah.
And the research seems pretty clear. While you need some oversight, leaning too hard on those minute-by-minute phone operational controls can really backfire. It can stifle autonomy, hurt job satisfaction, and even drag down sales performance in the end.
That's the core message.
It really points towards cultivating that autonomous motivation, that internal drive and sense of ownership as being the more effective path long term.
Absolutely. Which leads to a big, maybe provocative thought for everyone listening to mull over.
Oh, go on.
Well, inside sales is growing massively, right?
Right.
So becoming huge.
Yeah.
So given that, how can organizations fundamentally rethink their performance management systems for these teams?
Rethink them how?
To genuinely prioritize agent empowerment, long-term engagement, and well-being over purely transactional metrics like call times and immediate sales numbers. What innovative approaches could bridge that gap between operational efficiency and individual autonomy? How do we make it work for both the company and the salesperson?
That's a challenge.
It is, but this research strongly suggests the answer lies somewhere in empowering your team, not just controlling them. Food for thought.